Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. This is 3 reasons feelings aren't the truth. So, oftentimes we have been conditioned to think that if we have a feeling, that we should act on that feeling, that we should ruminate in that feeling, that whatever we're feeling is our truth, which, by the way, is a trending term that I literally loathe, because in order to assess the truth, you have to assess more than what your internal compass is telling you. When we think about feelings, these are things that can come super instantaneously. And then when we think about them, ruminate on them, or even allow ourselves some time, that feeling can go away. Don't mistake what I'm saying to say that feelings are a negative thing. They're not. Feelings are meant to be felt. All feelings are just that, feelings. There's no good feelings or bad feelings, they just are. So anger, hurt, rage, all of those things, those internal aspects of the feelings, all normal. It's when you get to the part where you're actually behaving on them that they become something different. And that's why it's important to know why feelings aren't the truth. Because a lot of times we tell ourselves a story, and I say that often, but we tell ourselves a story that the way that we feel is the truth of a situation. And if you just logistically look at that, it doesn't even make sense. Because if you feel one way and someone else feels another way, then how are feelings creating truth in that situation? They don't, because your feelings are based on your perspective and your past, and that other person's feelings are based on their perspective and also their past. And so feelings are data. They really are. And we're going to talk about that in a second, to let you know what is going on inside of you internally. And then in order to assess the truth, you have to process all of the emotions that are wrapped up inside of that situation and see what's really happening in the relationship. And I'll give you an example. So let's say you get into an argument, and let's say the argument's about, the person not being available when you text them. Okay, so if I'm that person in that situation, I'm going to feel suffocated because I don't even have the notifications on in my phone. Fun fact, I know that's not like a common thing for people. I don't have notifications on my phone, and I don't have them on my phone for a reason. There was a point in time where I felt like if people needed to access me, they had full access to me all the time, and it was very daunting to me because I felt pressure to respond immediately when someone texted me. Now, of course, my kids are something different, but I felt like this was true for everyone. So, in an effort to make that not the truth, I turned off the notifications so that when I got an opportunity to respond to text messages, I could do it when the opportunity presented itself. So if I'm the person who is in that relationship and my partner is upset with me because I didn't respond to their text message immediately, I'm going to feel suffocated and probably, because of my past, slightly controlled. So I might say, that's controlling. My life doesn't revolve around you. And those might be the emotions that I feel. Maybe I'm not voicing it, but that's what I feel. On the other hand, that other person may feel like, well, if she's not responding to me, then perhaps she doesn't think I'm good enough, valuable to her, I'm not a priority, etc. Now, both of those feelings exist in their data, but the truth of the situation is there was a text message that wasn't answered, and one person is operating from their past in that they don't want to have to be at the whim of someone else. And one person is operating from their past in that if someone isn't available to them, then they're not being prioritized. That is the truth of the situation. Neither one of those emotions are true. There's probably a happy median somewhere in there. So the first reason that feelings aren't truth is that they are data. They are information for you to collect and self-assess. So if something makes me angry, there's some data. Why is that thing making me angry? Is it from the past or is it from now? Remember, I tell you all the time that I always ask myself, is this a me problem? Is it a them problem? Is it an us problem? Is it a company problem? Whatever I'm dealing with at the time. And they're data for the other person, for them to collect and self-assess, but also for you to collect and self-assess. So if you know that somebody flies off the handle every time you don't do exactly what they say, there's some data for you to collect. It's not for you to determine whether that's a truth or whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's data. So their feeling, when you collect it, can tell you something about the situation and about yourself. Am I willing to continue to be in this situation? Am I willing to continue to keep maneuvering this situation? Do I need to set some boundaries? Do I need to remove this person from my life, etc.? So feelings are literally just data. And when you're thinking about your own feelings, the only way that you can use them as data is if you self-assess by using this something as a pattern. Like, this thing comes up all the time and it always makes me angry. What is it? Like, I told my kids the other day, my daughter sent me this picture, and it was of a one of those like house signs that are in the home goods store, and it said something like, don't mind the mess, my kids are making memories. And then underneath of it said, yeah, memories of me yelling about the mess. And it's funny because I don't usually yell, but like I get very annoyed when they don't clean up after themselves. So when we had a conversation about it, I explained to them what it's actually a story that I'm actually telling myself based on what they're not doing. So when they don't clean up after themselves, I tell myself that they don't care that I'm constantly doing work all the time to make sure that our home is clean and that things get done. And that makes me feel like I'm not good enough for them to even clean up after themselves. Now, I don't place that pressure on them. I tell them a story that I'm telling myself is, I don't feel good enough because you guys don't care enough to clean out after your mess. How can we work together to make sure that the messes are being cleaned up? And I'll work on me interpreting that into something that it's actually not. So again, data. The second thing is feelings are relative. So different people could be placed in the same situation and have different feelings about that situation, which is why they're relative. And most of that is based on conditioning or past experiences. So if I've been conditioned in shame and guilt, then there's going to be a lot of things that make me feel shame and guilt, even if the situation doesn't warrant shame and guilt. And those are internal filters that I'm processing everything through, which causes those heightened emotions. Relative because some people are just really sensitive to their feelings. Some people have big feelings about a lot of things, and maybe that's something they need to deal with, and maybe it's just who they are. Relative because the people on the other side of the spectrum might push down their feelings because they don't want to have chaos. They just want to be at peace. And again, back to that conditioning thing, a lot of what you feel is based on what you know. So your past has told you that these things are true, and therefore you feel them. If you really assess that, you might not feel so big about that thing. And just a disclaimer, I'm not telling you to get rid of your feelings. I'm just telling you to frame them around the fact that they're not always truth. They're just feelings. And the last one is feelings are impulsive. So this is why a lot of people will say, sleep on it and then tell me what you think in the morning. Or, go into different rooms, take a break, and then come back. Or go do some breath work and then come back, etc. We'll talk about this later, right? All of that is because feelings are impulsive. When we have feelings without logic and we act on those feelings, usually the behaviors aren't representative of who we are or even how we actually feel. So because feelings are impulsive, you can't really assess them as truth because they're not. It might be an instant thing. For instance, somebody cuts me off and I'm like, what is wrong with you? You cannot be that stupid, right? But when I actually think about it, I might be like, well, perhaps they weren't paying attention, or perhaps they're in a hurry, and it's really not that big of a deal, but the impulse said to react that way. That's a great example of that. So what should we use them for? Well, feelings can be used to determine data patterns. So like, when does that thing occur the most? Are you having that feeling more at night than you're having it in the morning? Is there a bigger concern that you're seeing over and over again, and that feeling is a result of that? So they really give you data patterns, and you're able to assess yourself and assess the situation based on when those big emotions are coming up. Also, you can use them to determine your conditioning triggers. So when you're having that big emotion, you can say, something just triggered me. That is the one way that I was able to really dig deep into the conditioning that I was dealing with, because I took data points on my conditioning triggers. And so every time I would get triggered, it really would lead back to the same core belief. It was just one. I'm not enough. And it's the same thing that I was telling you about the conversation with my kids. And it's the same thing that comes up quite often. And that is a conditioning trigger. It's something that I felt as a kid. A core belief was created, and I continue to carry that with me. So my emotions are usually attached to that thing. And the bigger emotions are almost always attached to that thing. So if you use your emotions as data, you can really figure out what conditioning exists in you by looking at your triggers. Whatever triggers you, whatever creates that big emotion, has a deeper root than just the emotion itself. And then lastly, and always my favorite one, is that when you really look at your feelings and you're using them as data, you can assess what are your areas of growth. So if I'm consistently angry, then I probably need to work on delving deep to find out what is causing that anger, because anger is an emotion, but anger is usually tied to sadness. Anger is usually tied to hurt. And so we might see someone who's consistently angry, but really what they're experiencing is hurt and sadness. And if you're taking your feelings as data, you'll be able to figure that out about yourself and about the people around you. I do it quite often, and I think a lot of us do with toddlers, right? Toddlers are throwing a temper tantrum in the middle of the floor. Are they really angry and belligerent? No. There's probably a feeling of sadness in there. And if we're being honest, it's probably a need for more attention or consoling. And so a lack of love creates a sense of not feeling safe, and that feeling of not feeling safe creates a fear, and then that fear turns into anger. So if you have a person in your life, or even yourself, who's consistently feeling angry, it's probably time to take some data on that and really realize that you can find your areas of growth just based on the emotions that you're feeling. Thank you for tuning in. So glad that you're here. And also remember that my course opened on August 1st. And so to apply to that course, you can click on the link and it'll take you to a webinar to learn some ways to get yourself to a place of peace, and to schedule a 30-minute session with me to decide if maybe we could work together. And if we're a match to work together, then you can get on my calendar to take the course. I would love to see you guys there. Thanks again for tuning in. Look me up on all social media sites as Carrie Nicole.